Oregon's soon-to-be senator lives with his wife, Susan, in Pendleton. I am told by a family outsider that their 3 children are all delightful, which impresses me mightily. As an 8-year-old growing up in Washington, D.C., rumor has it that Gordon Smith first decided and dreamt of being a United States senator. His education at Brigham Young University, followed by a law degree from Southwestern University School of Law in Los Angeles, helped prepare him to work for that dream. The presidency of Smith Frozen Foods in Pendleton, where his company processes some 15% of this nation's peas, corn, and carrots, as we had for lunch today, has given him a unique and tasty view of America's economy. Gordon Smith's presidency of the Oregon Senate was praised by the Oregonian as relying on conciliation rather than confrontation. The Oregon also called him deft, a word my Random House dictionary says means dexterous, nimble, skillful, and clever. In short, Senator-elect Smith is about to embark on a challenging adventure for which he has well prepared himself. He will soon return to Washington, D.C., and those parents in the audience whose older children have returned home to live with them and are distressed about that can take comfort in knowing that he returns to live with his mother. So I think that it must be few mothers who have a senator come home to live with them. He certainly knows that Senator Hatfield's shoes are enormous and greatly admired. We are delighted that he has come today to tell us what he is thinking about as his life and ours takes this new course. Welcome, Gordon Smith.
Thank you very much. It is true that while I was born in Oregon by accident, I have returned to Oregon by chance, or by choice. My mother does still live in the Chevy Chase, Maryland area, and while this current school year still has time to run, Sharon and our children will remain in Oregon and move back this summer. And when I began to look for an apartment in Washington, D.C., my mother made it real clear that I was going to be living at home with her. And so I truly look forward to going home and living with my mother. But for me, Oregon will always be home. And I want you to know what a deep honor it is for me to come before this distinguished group of Oregonians, the City Club. The last time I came here, I suppose it's always a challenge to one's nerves to address distinguished people. But the last time I came, it was with my friend and now colleague, Ron Wyden, where we debated for you, and I think one of the most vigorous debates in Oregon history. And I think it was a very good debate for both of us. And it is an honor to be back again to speak with you. I note in the audience 2 distinguished people. My colleague to be, Congresswoman Elizabeth Furs. It's good to see you, Congresswoman. And another person you may not know, and if you don't like my election, you may have him to blame. He's a fellow Pendletonian, and I want to acknowledge him. His name is Scott Duff. He works for the United States Department of Agriculture. Scott, Scott was my first opponent in politics, and we ran a vigorous race against one another for the state Senate. And it was a good race, and Northeastern Oregon was better for the vigorous debate that we engaged in. I want you to know that it will be a great privilege to work with Congresswoman Furs, Senator Ron Wyden, and other members of the Oregon congressional delegation. I think we have a small delegation, but with lots of horsepower and lots of energy, and I think a real determination to hear clearly from this last election the message from the people to get together and find ways to make progress. And I certainly intend for that to be my approach. This is not the first time when you have had a United States Senator, or one about to be, come to speak to the City Club of Portland from Eastern Oregon. The first time that almost happened was on April the 21st, 1926. It was an address to be given by Senator Robert Stanfield. There's a little town in my state Senate district called Stanfield. It's named after this man. He was a one-term senator from Oregon, and he almost came here, but sent his message. I want the record to reflect that I showed up. And it is remarkable to read his remarks that he was prepared to give to this club. He talked about agricultural concerns. He talked about banking concerns, which after the First World War were in real flux. He talked about the issue of trade and how Oregon fit into the world economy. It's amazing how much things have stayed the same. I find it really interesting in here where he gives an explanation about why he had been out of contact with anyone for about 6 months. You won't have that problem with me. Apparently he didn't show up in the Senate either. Maybe that's why he was there one term. Don't think that happens much anymore. Many people have asked me what kind of senator I'll be, what will be my approach to this job, and I think that is what I would like to tell you about today. First, let me indicate to you that my political experience has been in Oregon. My life's experience has mostly been in Oregon. My U.S. Senate candidacy has been here in Oregon, and I had a unique experience. I think I'm the only one in recent American history who has run for the United States Senate twice within a 12-month period of time, within one calendar year. I would not recommend it to anyone. It is an incredibly difficult experience, but I believe I came to know things about who I am. I think I came to know things about Oregon that I would not have known through any other process. And so I'm glad I survived it, and obviously glad that I won. But you have a choice when you go to Washington, D.C. You can focus your time and your attention and your staff upon Washington, or you can focus upon your home state. It will be my intention to set up a staff of Oregonians, people who are from Oregon or who have strong ties either through marriage or living here or working here in some way, so that they understand Oregon in ways that I have come to understand Oregon. I intend to be back very regularly to hold town halls all over this state. I intend to set up an advisory committee of about 20 people in different counties so that I can get a cross-section of women and men in this state of different political persuasions to talk to me about what they see and hear and feel, and to do this on a regular basis. It is very easy, I believe, to go to Washington, D.C. and think that the world begins to revolve around that place. Important as it is, this is where it is really at. All politics is local, as Tip O'Neill said. But truly, the best government is also local. And I have always believed that good government is good politics, and therefore the focus of my attention, my office, my time will be listening to, learning from, and responding to Oregonians. And to do that, I intend to establish 5 U.S. Senate offices for my seat throughout Oregon. The main one will be here in Portland. There will also be offices, we believe at this point, in Medford, in Eugene, and in Bend, and in Pendleton. I think that that is an absolutely crucial thing to do to bring this state together, and that will be my intention. I noticed in the Oregonian the other day, Jack Oman had a cartoon where I'm, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and making a motion to Jesse Helms that Portland established diplomatic relations with Eastern Oregon. I intend to be that diplomat. I intend to talk of Portland concerns, city concerns, when I'm in the country. I intend to talk about country concerns when I come to the city. I think, by and large, good things came out of the last election, and some understanding was restored. I, for example, was very disappointed that light rail did not pass. I think that we will regret that. I've been a champion of that because I believe that we need to plan legitimate components for transportation, different ways to bear one another's burdens, so that we, in fact, can have livability in this city as our population grows, and it will grow. I believe that Oregonians did the right thing to reject what was euphemistically called the Clean Streams Initiative. Everyone wants clean streams, and I do first of all. That's why, as a state senator, I pushed and passed a bill called Senate Bill 1010, which gives Governor Kitzhaber a foundation now for working with ranchers and farmers to work towards providing riparian areas that will, in fact, be free from pollution, but to do it in a way that provides more incentives and less club. I think that's one of the missing ingredients that we find too often in government. I believe that my focus should be Oregon-based because, not just because my experience is Oregon-based, but that experience teaches me something very important about Oregon. And I suppose the same is true of other states. But in my 4 years in public life, I have been there when the Oregon Health Plan has been funded. I have been there to write and implement welfare reform. These are examples where I have seen Oregon step to the forefront, and provide national models. I intend to fight for the Oregon Health Plan at the federal level to keep it going and to keep it strong. I believe that welfare reform is the right path, and we in Oregon have provided an example for the whole country. Do you realize that in the last 18 months, our welfare rolls that once were at 40,000 people have now been reduced by 16,000 people, and that the bill that President Clinton signed in welfare reform, because of our success, will bring annually to the state of Oregon $20 million in order to transition the remaining people who are dependent upon government into jobs, into the private sector. I have always believed that the very best social welfare program in the world is a private sector jobs. And if you want to think of my mission as a U.S. Senator, it is going to be that of an ambassador for democratic private enterprise. That's a small d, democratic. Democratic private enterprise. I believe in free enterprise. I believe that that is the best way we can help one another. I believe in jobs and in opportunity, and my efforts are going to be to foster that. When you look at the focus of local input and knowledge, I think it is absolutely critical that we continue to work on things so vital to our future in Oregon, things like education. You know, for years, the feeling has been that Washington has the answers. Just keep throwing money at education problems and they'll get fixed. Too often, money with, rather, mandates without money has been thrown at education, and it has begun to bog down our public system. While I don't agree with everything in Oregon's education reform, I do like the fact that it is locally sponsored and it is being locally involved. Yesterday, I was in Pendleton and went to the Lincoln Elementary School there. And there's a big debate in our society right now about whether values should be taught in public schools. I believe they should be if the parents are there to help define what those values are. And I was surrounded by first, second, and third grade children, and they were teaching values like respect and responsibility and caring for people. Now, those are real easy values for me to teach, and what was all the more wonderful is that these children were not just surrounded by their teachers. They were surrounded by their parents too. The room was full of parents. That is the kind of local response to providing good education that we need to continue to foster. Next, I'd like to talk about the environment and how locally we can care for our environment. Now, I believe that the federal government has legitimate roles in issues like clean air and clean water and needs to set standards below which no state or company or anyone should fall. But I do believe that we need to provide more input at the local level on environmental issues, because I believe my campaigns prove Oregonians care about the environment, but they also care about jobs too. I believe I have seen that in human terms all over this state, and they want us to find an appropriate balance. Because if we don't, we will hurt our state, and we must not do that. For example, I met with a group of farmers yesterday out towards the Hermiston area. And they are very concerned about federal officials who look them in the eye now and without blinking and in all seriousness are beginning to talk about removing dams on the Columbia River. I want those officials, whoever they are, to know that I'm their opponent in that effort. There are legitimate ways that make sense economically and save salmon actually that we can pursue without measures that will destroy the infrastructure of this northwestern region. You cannot take out dams and have flood control. And we all ought to be very attuned to that this time of year. You cannot take out dams and have electrical rates that support our infrastructure. You cannot take out dams and have navigable rivers. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you know this, but let me demonstrate, I suspect you do. Let me demonstrate to you why the city and the country need each other. Do you realize that 20% of America's wheat comes down the Columbia River from Oregon and Washington and Idaho? Right down here. 20% of America's wheat, and that it is then exported all over this world. We call Portland, Portland for a reason. If you don't have the ability to move commerce on that river, if you don't have a harbor that can be utilized, it will impact the city in ways that I think are unacceptable. There are tens of thousands of jobs within the Portland community that depend upon the country and the Columbia River to continue operating. I want them to know I'm going to fight for their defense. I want you to know I'm going to fight for a policy that saves salmon in ways that work, in ways that make physical sense, in ways that actually get the job done, and remember that we have got to keep in mind our obligation to our fellow citizens too. Finally, let me talk about another issue that isn't just local, it's national, and that is the issue of the budget. We don't have a more important issue as a country than finding a way to balance our budget. It has got to get beyond just the stage of rhetoric. It has got to get beyond the stage of just being a political football. I want you to know that I will go and work on this issue in a way that brings Republicans and Democrats together. We have simply got to do this. I was very honored the other day to be sitting in a dentist chair here in the city of Portland, and the receptionist came running in and said, somebody by the name of Lott, Senator Lott, is looking for you. Do you want to talk to him? I did. I got on, and his staff put him on, and he said, where are you, Gordon? And I said, I'm in a dentist chair. And he said, let me relieve your pain. I'm going to make you the only freshman on the Senate Budget Committee. And so I was given that appointment, and I did not take long to accept it. Because on that committee will be provided the template that will allow the Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee to do their work and to go on a course that will ultimately balance this budget. We need to do that. And it's not just all bad news in doing that. good things will happen for America and for Oregon if we in fact balance our budget. It will in fact reduce the government's take in the private sector money markets. It will in fact allow interest rates to come down on cars and homes and college tuitions. It will put real dollars in the pockets of real people. And I think that that's good. I think as we restrain the rate of growth of the public sector, a public sector that we do need, we will also expand the private sector and private sector opportunities. Well, I look forward to being a part of that. And I look forward to working with President Clinton and members of the Democratic Party to take into account their ideas when as they are very serious about balancing the budget. I hope that they are, because we need to take each other by our words and begin to turn them into action. And I know by being on that committee, I may have to cast some tough votes. But ultimately, if we don't come together on issues like Medicare, it won't be those who vote for Medicare to reform it and make it solvent who are punished politically. It'll be those who do nothing and allow it to go bankrupt who will be punished politically. We have got to come together. I believe Oregon stands on the threshold of a great future. It is a future that I believe will be called the Pacific Century, the Pacific Ocean, the Pacific Rim. Oregon is ideally suited to take advantage of that. Some people wonder why I took a committee selection on the Foreign Relations Committee. I did so because I will have an immediate subcommittee chairmanship on that committee. That is the committee also which does control issues on trade. It is on that committee that I hope to be involved in a major way and to do all that I can to foster exports, both agricultural and high-tech exports from Portland and the Northwest region. I think we have every reason for optimism, and I am deeply, deeply honored by the trust that Oregonians have placed in me to be a member of the United States Senate and to work in this effort. I don't need to tell you how difficult, I'm sure you followed this political campaign. It's been difficult for all of you. I want you to know that Ron Wyden and I like each other. We've had probably 6 meetings together. They have been delightful. I believe that he and I can work together across caucus lines to Oregon's advantage, because there's a lot of things that go on in the Legislative Assembly that are not political. They're regional, they're parochial, they're about Portland, they're about Pendleton. And on those things we can come together, the city and the country, a senator from the city, a senator from the country, because ultimately it's one state and we're one country. I believe will work very, very well to Oregon's advantage. Now, some people say, how can you work with someone who has been pounding away at you and you at them? I have to tell you honestly, there are things about political campaigns that I deeply regret and things I learned and did not repeat in my second campaign. And I hope that others learn from that experience as well. But you have got to remember in a political campaign that while it affects you personally, it is not meant personally. It is a contest of ideas, and personalities are sometimes get in the crosshairs. But when it's over, it's time to remember that you're Americans, that you're Oregonians, and that you have a whole lot more in common than you do in difference. And so it is in that spirit that I believe Senator Wyden and I and members of the delegation will work constructively together. And I believe that that's what the people of Oregon are crying out for. Had a remarkable experience after this most difficult year of my life. We went back to Washington, Sharon and I, last week, and we went through the election of our leadership and the assignment of committees. By the way, I was also put on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. That's my third committee. And then we were invited to go into the United States Senate, the chamber itself. I had never been in there. And we were invited to go in there to listen to an address of Senator Robert Byrd. Senator Byrd is a scholar of the United States Senate, both its history in this country and also the history of the Roman Senate in world history. And as I walked into that distinguished, hallowed chamber, someone addressed me as Senator Smith and welcomed me to the Senate. And I had to stop and leave and go out and control my emotions because it was so hard to get there. And I want you to know that it means a great deal to me. I do not take this lightly, and my every working thought and action will be to working for your benefit, doing my level best to figure out what's the right thing to do. See, the difference between Republicans and Democrats isn't between good people and bad people. It is rather trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. And in a strange way, Republicans and Democrats need each other to continue to test the assumptions upon which we base our public policies. Now, I need Democrats. I prefer them in the minority. But we need one another. Because one of the things I have found out in my public life, in working with John Kitzhaber and other Democrat state senators, nobody has a monopoly on the truth. No one has a monopoly on the truth. But what we need to do is keep our focus on the big picture, on things that really matter, on fiscal responsibility, on individual liberty, and remember that the United States Senate, as Senator Byrd explained to us, was an institution designed to slow things down. That may seem surprising to you, but he made it real clear to us. I don't know how you even run the U.S. Senate with these kind of rules, but that any senator, whether 97, which is what I am, or the majority leader, has the same vote and the ability to put a hold on any other senator's legislation. And any senator can filibuster anybody else's bill as long as he or she has got a voice in their body. Now, that does slow things down. I see Dick Springer in the back. Dick, I don't know how I've ever gotten through by pea harvest if we'd have had those kind of rules in the state Senate. But I do honestly believe that Republicans and Democrats this time will understand, will remember the Senate's role to slow down the impetuous things that may come up, but that we will ultimately come together in ways that are crucial, that are vital for America. That's my pledge. That's my commitment to you. I thank you for the honor of serving my native state of Oregon, and I hope you will all know, irrespective of your race, your religion, your political affiliation, my door is open to you, my heart is open to you, and my ear will be open to you. Thank you very much.
Senator, in your talk you addressed your position on some environmental issues, and I'd like to ask you one more. You support compensation of property owners in the event of a decrease in value due to government regulation or action. And in light of some of the funding problems in state and local governments and the federal government, could you tell how this will be done without jeopardizing recreational and environmental goals? Thank you.
As a general concept, yes, I do support compensation for government takings of private property. But let me tell you what the debate is about. The debate is about where should the threshold be for compensation. Currently, the United States Constitution provides for compensation for government takings. But the threshold, according to recent Supreme Court rulings, is 95% of the value of your property. That the government can regulate away 95% of the value of your property before there's any public obligation to compensate you. I think that threshold's too high. I voted on something in the state Senate that said it take 10%. After 10%, you take it. That's probably too low. But somewhere between 95% and 10%, there ought to be a threshold at which we say, and this is an important issue, one of the things that distinguishes America and democratic free enterprise from socialism or communism is that we respect the sanctity of private property. With private property come public responsibilities. What we're fighting over is the point at which we say the public must pay or be more careful in how it regulates. I don't know where that is, but I intend to engage in the debate. I hope it's somewhere around 50%.
Senator Smith, you mentioned in your remarks that you were disappointed in the outcome of the light rail vote, as were many, many of us. We're very concerned about the quality of life here and in the region. I would like to hear, especially in light of your Budget Committee assignment, how you hope or expect to advocate and encourage the federal government to give in the support that we now need.
Well, I was criticized more severely from the right than the left for my support of light rail. And I know some in the media always cast into doubt or my motives in supporting light rail. My support of light rail comes out of my life's experience. I've lived in cities with it, and I've lived in cities without it. And believe me, those cities with it have a better quality of life than those without it. I went to law school in Los Angeles, and I remember having a law clerkship in Santa Ana. My wife and I lived down by the University of Southern California. I'd have loved to have had a train to get on instead of bucking the traffic 2 hours each way. I don't want that kind of a future for Oregon. I believe, therefore, it is a legitimate thing for government to, in fact, I think it's one of government's most important responsibilities outside of public education and public safety is public infrastructure. I happen to believe that while trains are expensive, the alternatives are more expensive when you take into account quality of life, the lack of management and growth, and frankly, the loss of time that we all suffer because of the congestion, when the only reliance you have is just on the internal combustion engine. I will simply advocate that a continued obligation in the United States government is to support legitimate infrastructure expenditures, and I hope Portland Light Rail is one of those. My support of Portland Light Rail was not political, it is substantive, and the proof of that will be in the coming years.
Dan Goldie, member. One of the first issues that you'll be asked to vote on when you take office will be the constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Right. I was delighted to read in the paper that you indicated that you'd like to see some amendment to it that would deal with the question of the courts taking over the fiscal policy of the United States through such an amendment. But there are other problems in the amendment that a panel of economists that appeared here just before the election regarded as catastrophic if the amendment should pass, such as turning every recession into a depression and the lack of a capital budget in the Constitution Amendment. My question is this: if you find that you cannot get the amendments to the constitutional amendment as proposed that you believe would protect the citizenry against those events, would you follow in the footsteps of your illustrious predecessor, Senator Hatfield, and buck the leadership in the Senate and vote against it?
If I believed it was ultimately not in the interest of America, I would. I'm going to be consistent, though, in my support and belief in the need for a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. I raised the issue of judicial review because I believe that that is something that needs to be included in a more comprehensive way. I don't believe that a balanced budget amendment that does not provide an adequate judicial remedy will do any more than just take the Constitution and reduce it to the level of a statute. I don't think you want to do that with the Constitution, but I do believe Thomas Jefferson was right 200 years ago when he advocated for the need for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. We are in a cycle as a people right now, and you have to say what's worse, the downside of a balanced budget amendment or the downside of perpetual deficits that ultimately bankrupt this country. I think it can be a legitimate tool, but it has to be more carefully crafted. I've already raised this with Trent Lott to his face in a public setting, saying you've got to make sure that there's a judicial remedy in a balanced budget amendment that does not allow a federal district judge to raise a tax or cut a program, but defines their remedy to some way to enjoining the issuance of checks to force the Congress to come together and either raise taxes or reduce programs. That is the debate that goes on in the state legislature every time. And Dick Springer and I had lots of legitimate debates about this program or that program and the size of the state budget. And we did it honestly. We didn't do it with a credit card on his children or my future grandchildren. We did it today. And that is the kind of debate we need to have in Washington, but we're not getting in Washington because we are in, under current law, a perpetuation of deficits and spending beyond our means. I believe we need it. I believe it can be improved from the version that Mark Hatfield voted no on. And I believe there needs to be enough exceptions so that there are overrides for economic emergencies. I believe those are in there, and military emergencies. There needs to be enough flexibility. Thank you very much, Dan.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Senator, in your campaign, you released a balanced budget plan in which you said, quote, soaring welfare costs are slowly bankrupting the nation, end quote. Now, politically, that's a smart thing to say because many people believe that welfare is the biggest item in the federal budget. Of course, in fact, cash welfare is 1% of the budget, food stamps another 1.5%. The big ticket items are Social Security, Medicare, and defense.
Of course.
So my question for you, sir, is, as a senator on the budget committee, will you change your wicked ways and devote some effort to trying to explain to the disgruntled electorate that most of their tax dollars actually go to very popular programs?
I promise you to change my wicked ways. Yeah. I didn't think I had any of those, actually, but let me just indicate, what the gentleman says is true. The difficulty, and frankly, one of the reasons why I think we need both a constitutional requirement, even the cover of the Constitution, to break through these difficult issues, is that most of our excess spending above our revenues, is done in very popular programs. And that's why I go to Washington with a plea to my colleagues on the other side. Let's figure it out. Let's find a way where we save Medicare from bankruptcy, that we continue to stabilize Social Security, and that I have opposed consistently the Republican efforts to increase military spending above levels which are even requested by the Pentagon. I think that's more about job creation in some instances than it is about national defense. Having said that, I want you to know I believe, as the Constitution makes clear, that providing for the common defense is the first constitutional obligation of the Congress and of the federal government. So we can't shortchange military spending, but you have got to address military spending to who your enemies are. Our enemies in the world today are different than they were just a few years ago. So it makes no sense to me to be building weaponry systems that were designed to defeat the Soviet Union. It makes no sense to me to put up military anti-defense missile systems, for example, when our enemies now are Saddam Hussein, who has no ability to deliver a missile to New York City. But the way he would do it would be in an attaché case under the parking garage of a building in New York City. A missile defense system doesn't save you in that situation. So I think you have to tailor your defense dollars to who your enemies are, and then to anticipate those. So I understand there are tough choices to be made, and I don't intend to balance the budget just on the backs of those who are least represented, and that's the poor, the disabled, often the elderly. I do think we're all in this together. I think there were some systemic problems in our welfare system. I believe we've made a huge step in changing that, and I support President Clinton in the bill that he signed. Does that mean that it doesn't need some improvements or changes? It probably does, but we'll take those as they come up one at a time. Thank you for that question.
Hi, Senator. Dave Eschbaugh, member. Following up on your comments on salmon and dams, do you support the listing of Oregon's coho salmon under the Endangered Species Act? And if so, what steps will you be taking in Washington?
I wouldn't list it yet. I would give Governor Kitzhaber's proposal on coho salmon a chance to work. I like, for the most part, his proposal. Before they list it, we ought to try it. I am committed to the saving of Columbia River salmon, coho salmon, and all of our rivers. But I would encourage every one of you, every Oregonian, to get last Sunday's Oregonian newspaper and read what was written there on the salmon issue. What it makes clear is that most of the problem of salmon mortality is in ocean water conditions that we cannot control. And it does not make sense to bankrupt everyone along freshwater areas over that issue. It does not excuse us, however, from just doing nothing. We need new discipline from the forest to the farm to the factories to our residences in how we relate with nature. I'm for that. That's why I carried Senate Bill 1010 on the floor of the state Senate, which many in the agriculture community thought was an Agriculture Practices Act. But I realized that if we did not begin to do things on a basis which I believe Governor Kitzhaber is proposing, which is to provide incentives and not just a club to improve environmental stewardship, that we were ultimately going to get taken over by the heavy hand of the federal government. So I believe we can fix these problems locally, and that's why I would give Governor Kitzhaber's plan on coho a chance to work before it's listed.
Walt Roberts, City Club member. My interest has been, as a citizen, how our governments are trying new and innovative ways to just do a better job of things. I'm interested in your perspective on the work of the Oregon Progress Board, resulting somewhat in the Oregon Option, which is sort of opening up new doors to how the federal government and the state, in this case Oregon, can use resources more effectively. So looking back and looking forward, what comments do you have on opportunities?
Well, I've supported the Oregon Progress Board with my votes on the Senate floor in their budget request, and I don't know of a business with any brains that doesn't try to measure their performance. I don't think it's wrong for government to try to do the same thing. I think Oregon has done so in a way that is frankly, again, a national model whereby others can see how we are measuring our performance. What kind of benefit are you getting for the cost imposed on the taxpayer? I think that's all to the good. If the goals begin to drive the process, though, in a way that the people don't support, they're going to let us know at the ballot box. Sometimes we have to change our goal when the taxpayer changes his or her mind. But on balance, I believe that our benchmark program has been working and has provided us with some information that's allowed us to be better at the business of government.
Lori Onnen, City Club member.
Good to see you, Lori.
Good afternoon. 10 years ago, Senator Hatfield was a real leader in putting together a compromise federal bill that provided regional protection for the Columbia Gorge. And it really has been one of his legacies. What we've seen in the last 10 years have been, through federal programs and federal support, increased economic diversification in gorge communities on both sides of the river, new recreation opportunities, public lands, more public parks and trails, and protection of the rural and natural heritage of the gorge from inappropriate development. And now with Senator Hatfield's retirement, there are certain interests who would want to roll back that federal protection to allow more inappropriate development, to allow loss of farms and forests in the gorge, and also to cut the federal programs that help support those goals. And my question is, can we count on you to oppose efforts to roll back the federal protection for the gorge, and also to work with folks to figure out how to continue funding some of those very important programs?
Yes, you can count on me.
Yes, good answer. Thank you.
The only thing I would add is it really relates to the takings issue. I may fight to help compensate where I think some of these legitimate public objectives impose too great a burden on some private interest. I would visit to say that issue to say, what do we need to do to be fair? But I believe there are some things in nature, in our natural heritage, that are so special, the gorge being one of them, that we have got to take the action that it needs to protect it. And I support that. I want you to remember, I don't care what you've seen on television, I'm a native Oregonian. I was born here by accident. I returned here by choice. And I love our natural heritage, and I'll fight to preserve it. I really believe you can do that in a way that's renewable and sustainable and keeps people and property, private property, in the equation. But there are things that are truly special that you've identified that I'll be there for you.
My name is Mark Smiley. I'm a City Club member. I have a question about your commitment that you made during the campaign to protect municipal watersheds, and especially in light of your conversation today about local control and local interests. On rainy days like we've had in the last several months, a lot of the municipal watersheds are really finding themselves under a blanket of mud, and I think the cities of Cottage Grove and Salem have really had to deal with that. As a corporate food processor and a former part-time Salem resident, do you support the City of Salem's request for a moratorium on logging and road building on federal lands in the North Santiam watershed until study can better understand the connection between clear-cutting in those watersheds and water quality? And I guess the bigger question is, as our senator-elect, do you have any suggestions on how we can better solve these problems instead of having to live with the symptoms of them?
Yeah, and again, I think it's, I would empower local communities to have more say in how we plan to use natural resources because they do affect local areas. As a resident of, I sleep in Salem I have almost every night this past year. We have a small place there we live in during the legislative sessions, and I can say as a Salem resident much of the year, a lot of the water quality problems Salem has is a result not from logging, but of their failure to increase municipal water system capacity. So I would want to make sure that there's actually a nexus between the logging and Salem's water problems. But I have supported consistently the preservation of the Opal Creek wilderness because I do see that as part of the watershed of the Willamette Valley, and that needed to happen, and I'm glad that it has happened. Whether you go beyond that is a much, much bigger question when part of Salem's problem is really local, and that is getting the resources to fix your water supply problem. And let me go on one, my wife is now the president of Smith Frozen Foods, so if any pipe breaks, we're going to go talk to her, not me. Let me talk about Portland's problem on water quality. You know, we do beat up real hard and real quick on private interests that violate clean water standards. And and would never suggest that we shouldn't have high standards. But the public sector needs to live up to those same standards. Every time it rains, as it has been doing frequently, this city pours millions of tons of raw human sewers in the Willamette River. How many fish does that kill? Who's quantifying that? Do we let the public sector off the hook? We shouldn't. Salem should fix its, and Portland should fix its problems. And as a federal official, I'll do everything I can to help to make sure that this happens. Part of the criticism that was leveled at me in the campaign for money that supposedly went to me, it actually went to the city of Weston, a little small community, a community that applied for a federal grant, and we supported it because their municipal system did not meet EPA DEQ standards. And so to upgrade that so it benefited the residences, Lamb Weston, Smith Frozen Foods, we all supported that program. It's a program that helps small rural communities upgrade their municipal systems so that they can meet new and important environmental standards. I support that. Even though I got blamed for it, I still think the federal government was right to help the city of Weston, even though I got blamed for it. It was the right thing to do because they're now in compliance we're all in compliance with new higher environmental laws. I think that's good. That's a way, again, that we help each other meet our burdens and to live more in harmony with nature.
I'm Ray Polani, a City Club member. Senator Smith, you indicated in your speech that you will maintain a focus on Oregon.
Yes.
Pendleton, LeGrand, and Baker City stand to lose rail passenger service, Amtrak. It's their only east-west link that balances I-84 and air travel. Allegedly, it's poor service. It only runs 3 times a week. But will you work to save it?
Yes.
And will you work to improve it?
Absolutely.
At least to daily service.
Yeah, I'm for it. I made it. This is the problem with the political dialogue. You can talk out loud sometimes, and your opponents will pick up on what you say. And what I made a comment about the Pioneer Line, and I know this because I'm the state senator from that area. And Amtrak officials have told me nobody rides this in the winter. Not nobody, but the ridership is way down in the winter, and it's way up in the summer. And so I made the comment, perhaps one of the solutions so that we can better utilize your federal subsidized dollars on the Pioneer, perhaps we do more in the summer and less in the winter. I got hammered for that statement. All I was trying to do is make sense of your money. But I believe that Oregon, east to west, needs some rail service, and I will fight to do that in the best, most economical way I can, remembering that these are your tax dollars we're using.
You know, the minimum would be daily service, really. Mm-hmm. In the winter, you know what happens to I-84.
Right, I do.
Thank you.
Senator Smith, I'm a member of the club. My name is Monroe Sweetland.
Good to see you again, sir.
And I have frequently not voted for you.
I don't think you're the only one in this room with that same mistake.
But I must say that your statements today have been most reassuring.
Thank you.
I have a question to ask you. I hope you can answer briefly and correctly. When you go east next week or next month, you will have 2 important votes to cast immediately. One will be to re-elect the President pro tem of the U.S. Senate, the great statesman from South Carolina, who once ran for president himself, but who now seeks to do what no man has ever tried to do before. That's live to be 100 years old in the United States Senate. I wouldn't think of asking you to change your vote with respect to him. But with respect to your friend, the Republican leader of the Senate, Senator Lott of Mississippi, he stands opposed to the people of the Northwest and the people of Oregon on almost every issue you've mentioned today, which relates to anything more than our own home front here. And all the things that relate to our relationship to the rest of the Republic and to the international scene. In view of that fact, would you be willing to cast an independent vote, as Charles McNary might have done in the good old days when he was working with Democrats in a congenial and hospitable way?
Well, let me say, my experience in a legislative assembly teaches me that your first fight shouldn't be against the majority leader. And I have to say...
That was only your second choice.
I have to say that Trent Lott, he may not agree with us on everything in terms of the Northwest, but I'll change his mind.
All right, that's a very good commitment.
Paul Milius, club member. I guess I'm also looking for some reassurance. Given in the past, at least, I've been looking for a term, identified with perhaps as too strong some of the more extreme elements in your own party. how can you reassure those of us who are members of PFLAG or supporters of Planned Parenthood that, that your election is not part of a continuing drumbeat of threat to people and principles that we hold dear?
I appreciate that question. We raised some very difficult emotional issues, important issues. I want you to know that I don't believe in discrimination. I do believe it's important, and I will always vote. It's important to uphold a two-parent family of a man and a woman under a contract of marriage and law. I will always vote for that. Short of that, I'm anxious to help. I do not want gay and lesbian citizens, American citizens, to be fearful of me because I've been raised to love, to care for people, to love people. And I have never discriminated against people on that basis or any other. I employ people who are gay and lesbian, don't believe it's government's business what people do in the privacy of their own homes. And I believe as long as organizations such as the Boy Scouts and others are exempted from laws to protect gays and lesbians, religious exemptions, then I will be voting to give them that legal protection. I voted against a bill like that in the state legislature because they did not provide those exemptions, and I think they need to be there. I've been consistent on that issue, and I will be. On the issue of reproductive rights, I have never hid the fact that I personally believe that life is the right choice. I am pro-life. My 3 children are all adopted, but I believe America, and I believe that is a wonderful option to abortion. I believe America is very much made up its mind on the fact that abortion will be legal and the choice will be a woman's. I don't think that keeps people who are pro-life and pro-choice from working together to find reasonable accommodations to make abortion rare. I don't think pro-choice people who have supported me in the tens of thousands want more abortion. I think they want to work to find constructive ways and solutions. I'm going to work in that spirit, and that's what I've done, and that's what I'll do. And that's frankly what Mark Hatfield has done. And I intend to continue that tradition. Yes.
Amelie Holmstrom. I'm a retired teacher and the author of The Courtship of Life, and I am sitting here passionately hoping that you will support the arts. We hear a lot about the economy, but what we need is a soul and creativity and fairness and caring and sharing. And I wonder, what are your plans to support the arts and how are you going to do it?
You should chalk me down as an enthusiastic supporter of the arts. One of my hobbies is history. I was a history major at BYU. I love the study of history. And history teaches me that the arts have always enjoyed an element of public support, whether from a king or a bishop or a church or a government. Arts have needed some assistance to help foster creativity among our people. And I think the arts, as John F. Kennedy said, we should not be afraid of that which is beautiful in America. We should uphold it, promote it, encourage it, and I will.
Thank you very much. I dub you as the Knight of the Arts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need to stop the questions. Unfortunately, our time is out, and I know I speak for all of you in thanking Senator-elect Smith for his very clear and encouraging remarks, and I thank all the members of the City Club for their outstanding questions. We all wish Senator-elect Smith very well as he goes to Washington to look after all of us. We stand adjourned, and happy holidays. Thank you.